The chamber was old. Older than human civilization. Older than the pyramids, older than the first cities. Older than the moment when the first human looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there. 12 species have built this place together, thousands of years before humans learned to make fire. They called themselves the Galactic Council, and they ruled over 1,000 star systems with absolute authority. Ambassador Elena Vance walked across the polished floor alone. Her footsteps echoed in the vast space. Above her, the ceiling was made of transparent crystal, and she could see the purple and gold clouds of the Andara Nebula swirling slowly in the eternal night. She was 53 years old. Her hair was gray at the temples, and there were lines around her eyes from years of difficult negotiations. She had spent her entire adult life trying to earn respect for humanity in a galaxy that saw them as nothing more than clever animals who had recently learned to build spaceships. The council members watched her approach. They sat in a curved row of elevated platforms, each one designed for a different alien body. Some had scales. Some had feathers. Some had no solid form at all and existed as clouds of glowing gas contained in magnetic fields. High Arbiter Thiessen of the Valkyrie sat in the center. His species looked like tall insects with 4 arms and compound eyes that reflected light like black mirrors. The Valkyrie had been traveling between stars when humans were still living in caves. They considered themselves the wisest and most powerful species in the known galaxy. Elena stopped at the speaking platform and bowed her head in the formal greeting. She had practiced this moment for weeks. She knew exactly what she needed to say. The only question was whether anyone would listen. High Arbiter, she began, honored members of the council. I come before you today with information that concerns the survival of every species in this chamber. Thiesen's mandibles clicked together. It was a sound that meant mild interest, or perhaps amusement. Elena had learned to read Valkyrie expressions during her years as ambassador, but they were never easy to understand. Speak human, Thiessen said. His voice was translated by the device in Elena's ear, turning the clicking and hissing of his natural language into words she could understand. We will hear your concerns. Elena touched the control panel on her wrist, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed a map of the galaxy, with Council space marked in blue and the unexplored regions marked in gray. For the past 40 years, Elena said, humanity has maintained a network of listening posts at the edge of known space. We built them in secret, without informing the Council, because we wanted to know what was out there before it knew about us. There was a murmur of disapproval from some of the Council members. The Valkyrie considered unauthorized expansion to be a serious violation of galactic law. But Elena continued before anyone could interrupt. 3 months ago, our stations detected something. A pattern in the background radiation of space. At first, we thought it was natural. A cosmic phenomenon. But when we analyzed the data more carefully, we realized the truth. She touched another control, and the display changed. Red dots appeared on the map, forming a line that stretched from the far edge of the galaxy toward Council space. These are the locations of colonies and civilizations that have gone silent over the past century. The Drenith Cluster, the Hyperion colonies, the Outer Reach settlements. All of them stopped transmitting. All of them went dark. Elena paused and looked around the chamber. Some of the council members were paying attention now. Others still looked bored or skeptical. We sent probes to investigate, she continued. None of them returned. But before they were destroyed, they sent back images. The display changed again, and the chamber fell silent. The image showed a wall of darkness moving through space. It was not empty space. It was something else. Something that blocked out the stars behind it as it moved. And within that darkness, there were shapes. Vast, terrible shapes that hurt the mind to look at. And eyes. Thousands of ancient, hungry eyes. We call it the silence, Elena said. It moves through the galaxy, consuming everything in its path. Stars, planets, civilizations. Nothing survives its passing. And according to our calculations, it will reach Council space in approximately 18 months. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Thiessen made a sound that Elena recognized as laughter. "Ambassador Vance," he said, "humanity has been capable of space travel for barely 200 years. In that time, you have shown yourselves to be creative, yes, resourceful, even clever in your primitive way. But you are children. You look at shadows in the void and see monsters. You detect natural phenomena and call it apocalypse." "High Arbiter," Elena said, keeping her voice steady, "I understand your skepticism. But the evidence, Thiessen interrupted, is a collection of sensor readings that your species lacks the experience to properly interpret. The Valkyrie have watched the stars for 50,000 years. We have seen cosmic events that would terrify lesser species. We have mapped phenomena that your scientists cannot even imagine. And I tell you now, with absolute certainty, that there is nothing coming." Elena felt her hands trembling, but she forced herself to remain calm. "The colonies that went silent. How do you explain their destruction? Natural disasters, equipment failures, perhaps even conflicts among themselves. The universe is vast and dangerous, Ambassador. Colonies fail all the time. It is unfortunate, but it is not evidence of some galaxy-spanning threat. And the images from our probes?" Thiessen waved one of his 4 hands dismissively. "Sensor glitches. Radiation interference. Your human technology is impressive for its age, but it is still primitive compared to ours. If there was truly a threat approaching Council space, our own sensors would have detected it long ago." Elena looked around the chamber one more time. She saw dismissal on alien faces. She saw amusement. She saw the casual arrogance of species who had never faced a challenge they could not overcome. "I am asking you to prepare," she said quietly. "I am asking you to build defenses, to coordinate evacuation plans, to take basic precautions against a threat that could destroy everything we have built." "And I am telling you," Thiessen replied, "that such precautions are unnecessary. The Council has survived for 10,000 years. We have faced wars, plagues, and cosmic disasters. We are still here, and we will still be here long after humanity has faded into the footnotes of galactic history." The other Council members clicked and hummed in agreement. Elena realized that the decision had already been made. Perhaps it had been made before she even walked into the chamber. "Is there anything else, Ambassador?" Thiessen asked. Elena straightened her shoulders. "No, High Arbiter. I believe I have said everything I came to say." "Then this session is concluded. Your petition will be logged as human petition number 7412. You may return to your ship." Elena walked out of the chamber with her head held high. She did not look back. She did not allow herself to show any emotion until she was safely aboard her shuttle, alone in the cockpit, watching the massive Council station shrink behind her. Then she opened a secure channel to Earth. The encryption was military-grade, unbreakable by any technology the Council possessed. "This is Ambassador Vance," she said. "Priority Alpha." They refused to listen. "Repeat, the Council has rejected all warnings." There was a pause. Then a voice responded, calm and clear. "Understood, Ambassador. What are your recommendations?" Elena looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, in the darkness between galaxies, something terrible was moving closer with each passing hour. The Council thought they were safe. They thought their ancient power would protect them. They were wrong. Begin Protocol Prometheus, Elena said. Full activation. Tell the shipyards to work triple shifts. Tell the colonies to start evacuation drills. And tell the Admiral that he was right all along. Confirmed, Ambassador. Protocol Prometheus is now active. Humanity will be ready. Elena closed the channel and set a course for home. She had done everything she could to warn them. Now it was time to prepare for the war that was coming. Behind her, the Council Station glittered in the darkness, beautiful and ancient and completely unaware that its time was running out. 18 months passed like water flowing through open fingers. The galaxy continued as it always had. Trade ships moved between star systems carrying goods and passengers. Politicians argued about borders and taxes. Scientists made discoveries, and artists created beauty. Life went on, because life always went on, and because no one wanted to believe that it might someday stop. Humanity used every single day dot in the outer reaches of the Sol system. Beyond the orbit of Neptune, shipyards that appeared on no official map worked without rest. Workers lived in sealed habitats for months at a time, building things that were never meant to be built. Ships of war. Weapons that violated every treaty humanity had ever signed. Engines that could push a vessel to speeds the Council considered impossible. The project had no name. The workers called it simply the work, and they understood that they were building something that might save their species or destroy it. Either way, they would be ready. On Earth, the governments of the world conducted evacuation drills in secret. They called them emergency preparedness exercises and told the public they were practicing for natural disasters. Millions of people learned how to reach underground shelters in minutes. Food and water supplies were stockpiled in hidden locations. Medical facilities were built in places that could survive almost anything. The outer colonies went dark one by one, not because they were destroyed, but because they chose to hide. They shut down their broadcast towers and powered down their energy signatures. They became ghosts, invisible to anyone scanning the stars for signs of life. The Council noticed none of this. Humanity was beneath their attention. A minor species playing with toys in the corner of the galaxy, while the adults managed important affairs. Then the Valkyrie border colonies stopped transmitting. High Arbiter. Thiessen received the report during a routine administrative meeting. One of his aides mentioned it almost casually, as if it were a minor technical problem. Signal loss from the outer territories, the aide said. 17 colonies have missed their scheduled check-ins. Thiessen clicked his mandibles in annoyance. Equipment failure? Unknown, High Arbiter. We have dispatched repair crews. Good. Keep me informed. The repair crews never arrived. They vanished from sensors 3 hours after departing, leaving nothing behind but static. Thiessen grew concerned. He ordered a military survey fleet to investigate. The fleet consisted of 40 warships, each one capable of devastating an entire planet. They were commanded by Admiral Varn, a veteran of 3 colonial wars and one of the most respected officers in the Valkyrie Navy. Admiral Varn was confident as his fleet jumped to faster-than-light speed. He had faced pirates, rebels, and hostile alien species. He had never lost a battle. He told his officers that they would identify the problem, eliminate any threats, and be home within a week. The fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the outer territories. For a moment, everything seemed normal. Stars burned in the darkness. Planets orbited in their ancient paths. Space was quiet and empty. Then the sensors began to scream. Admiral Varn stared at his display, trying to understand what he was seeing. There was something ahead of them. Something vast. It stretched across the entire sensor grid, blocking out the stars behind it like a curtain of absolute darkness. What is that? One of his officers whispered. Before anyone could answer, the darkness moved. the fleet's communication array automatically transmitted everything it recorded back to Council space. The transmission lasted 9 seconds before the signal cut to static. Those 9 seconds were enough. The Council watched in horror as the recording played. They saw the wall of darkness rushing toward the fleet with impossible speed. They saw shapes within it, massive and terrible, things that looked like they had been designed by nightmares. They saw the first Valkyrie warship fire its weapons, and they saw the darkness swallow the energy blasts like a hungry mouth. They saw Admiral Varan's flagship, the pride of the Valkyrie Navy, crumple like paper in an invisible fist. Then the recording ended, and the council chamber was silent. Thiessen stood frozen at his platform, his compound eyes reflecting the blank screen where his fleet had died. For the first time in his long life, he did not know what to say. The silence, someone whispered. The humans warned us about the silence. Within hours, the council received reports from across the galaxy. The darkness was moving faster than anyone had predicted. It had already consumed the Valkyrie border territories and was pushing deeper into council space. Refugee ships were fleeing in every direction, carrying survivors who could not describe what they had seen without trembling. The council responded with everything it had. 4 species combined their military forces into the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. Over 2,000 warships gathered at the Thiessen Line, named after the High Arbiter himself, forming a defensive barrier that was meant to stop the enemy advance. The battle lasted 11 minutes. The silence consumed the fleet like fire consuming dry grass. Warships that had dominated space for centuries were torn apart in seconds. Admirals who had spent their lives studying military strategy found that none of their knowledge mattered against an enemy that did not follow any rules they understood. When it was over, the Thiessen Line existed only as debris floating in the void. 1 week later, the first council homeworld fell. The Valkyrie watched from orbit as their ancient cities burned. Billions of their people died in hours, consumed by a darkness that felt no mercy and showed no restraint. Their 10,000-year civilization, their art and science and history, was erased as if it had never existed. Thiessen received the news in his private chambers. He had not slept in days. His compound eyes were dull with exhaustion and grief. He had been High Arbiter for 300 years, and he had always believed that his wisdom could guide the council through any crisis. Now, he understood how wrong he had been. He opened a communication channel to Earth. The human ambassador's face appeared on his screen, and Thiessen felt a strange mixture of shame and desperate hope. "Ambassador Vance," he said. His voice was rough, broken. "I am contacting you on behalf of the Galactic Council. We face a threat beyond our ability to defeat. We formally request—" "We already know," Elena interrupted. Her voice was calm, steady. There was no anger in it, but there was no warmth either. "Then you will help us?" Thiessen asked. "You will send your forces to aid in our defense?" Elena was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her words were careful and measured. "High Arbiter, do you remember what you told me 18 months ago? You said that humanity was young. You said we saw monsters in the dark because we had not learned what the dark truly holds. You said your species had watched the stars for 50,000 years. Thiessen lowered his head. "I remember. You were right about one thing," Elena said. "We are young, but we have always known that the dark holds monsters. Our ancestors knew it when they huddled around fires on our homeworld, listening to predators moving in the night. We have never forgotten that lesson. Ambassador, please. Billions are dying. My people are being destroyed. Whatever anger you feel toward the Council, I am begging you to set it aside." Elena's expression softened slightly. "I am not angry, High Arbiter. I stopped being angry a long time ago. And yes, humanity will help you. We have been preparing for this moment since before I stood in your chamber and tried to warn you. Preparing? Decent asked. What do you mean? Elena smiled, but it was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had been proven right and wished with all her heart that she had been wrong. You will see soon enough, she said. Tell your remaining forces to withdraw behind human defensive lines. Tell your civilian populations to evacuate towards soul space. And High Arbiter? Yes. Try not to get in our way. The channel closed, and Thiessen was alone again. He did not know what humanity had planned. He did not know if anyone could stop the silence now that it had tasted blood. But for the first time in weeks, he felt something that might have been hope. Somewhere in the darkness between the stars, humanity was moving. And the galaxy was about to learn what that meant. The galaxy held its breath and waited to die. Refugees fled in every direction, their ships packed with whatever they could carry. Families that had lived on the same planets for generations now had nothing but the clothes on their backs and the memories in their hearts. Children asked their parents where they were going, and the parents had no answers. The silence continued its advance. It moved through council space like a wave of extinction, erasing everything it touched. Worlds that had been home to billions became empty rocks floating in the void. Great cities became dust. Ancient libraries containing the knowledge of countless generations were lost forever. The remaining council species gathered their surviving forces at the Viridian threshold, a region of space where the stars were thick and the navigation was difficult. It was their last natural defensive position. If the silence broke through here, there would be nothing left to protect. Military commanders from 5 different species argued about strategy. They blamed each other for past failures. They competed for control of the combined fleet. They could not agree on anything except the basic truth that they were all going to die. Then the humans arrived. Admiral Chun Wei stood on the bridge of the UN's Defiance and watched the tactical display update with new information. His ship was enormous, a mobile battle station the size of a small moon. It had been built in secret over the past 20 years, piece by piece, in shipyards hidden throughout the outer Sol system. He was 61 years old, with gray hair cut short in military style and dark eyes that had seen too many battles. He had spent his entire career preparing for a war that he hoped would never come. Now it was here, and he was ready. Admiral, his executive officer said, "We are receiving transmissions from the Allied fleet. They are requesting coordination protocols." Chun nodded slowly. "Open a channel. All frequencies. I want every ship in this sector to hear what I have to say." The communication officer worked at her console for a moment. "Channel open, sir." Chun stepped forward and began to speak. His voice was calm and steady, carrying the weight of authority earned through decades of service. "This is Admiral Chun Wei of the United Nations Space Command. To all surviving Council forces, I am taking command of this defensive action under Emergency Protocol 7 of the Sol Accords. Your governments have already agreed to this arrangement. You will follow my orders exactly and without question. There is no time for debate." He paused, letting the words sink in. Across the combined fleet, alien commanders listened in shock. Some were angry. Some were relieved. All of them were afraid. "To the enemy we call the silence," Chun continued. "I have a simpler message. You have come to the wrong galaxy. Turn back now, or learn what humanity does to those who threaten our home." He closed the channel and turned to his tactical officer. "Deploy the fleet. All ships." The galaxy watched as the human navy emerged from hiding. They had expected a few hundred vessels. Humanity's officially registered military consisted of approximately 300 ships, mostly small patrol craft designed for border security. The Council had never considered them a serious military power. Instead, Over 12,000 warships poured from hidden staging points throughout the Outer Rim. They appeared from behind asteroids, from within dust clouds, from places where no one had thought to look. Dreadnoughts larger than anything the Council had ever built. Carriers packed with thousands of fighter craft. Destroyers bristling with weapons that violated every treaty humanity had ever signed. The Valkyrie commander stared at his sensors in disbelief. "This is not possible," he whispered. "Where did they get these ships? How did they build them without anyone knowing?" His human liaison, a young officer named Lieutenant Park, allowed herself a small smile. "We've been preparing since first contact. 30 years of construction. 30 years of planning. 30 years of watching the galaxy and asking ourselves one question. What happens when something out there decides to come for us?" "But the cost," the Valkyrie commander said. "The resources required. Your species should not be capable of this." Lieutenant Park shrugged. "We're good at building things when we're scared. And we've always been scared. It's one of our best qualities." At the center of the human formation, the Defiance moved forward. It was surrounded by a protective shell of smaller vessels, but even alone it would have been terrifying. Its hull was covered with weapon emplacements, sensor arrays, and launch bays for fighter craft. It looked less like a ship and more like a metal planet designed for war. Admiral Chun studied the tactical display. The silence was approaching from the galactic east, a wall of darkness that stretched across 3 star systems. Within that darkness, he could see movement, shapes, creatures that existed partially outside normal space. Their forms shifting and changing in ways that hurt the human mind to observe. "All ships," he ordered. "Advance to attack position." The human fleet began to move. Not retreating, not holding defensive positions. Moving forward, directly toward the enemy. The alien commanders watching from their own ships could not believe what they were seeing. Every military doctrine in the known galaxy said that you fought the silence by running away and hoping it lost interest. You did not attack it. You could not attack it. It was too vast, too powerful, too ancient. "They're insane," the Valkyrie commander said. Lieutenant Park's smile faded, replaced by an expression that was harder and more determined. "We prefer to call it aggressive problem-solving." Admiral Chan opened another channel, this time to his own fleet. "All captains, this is the Admiral. You know what we're facing. You've seen the recordings. You know that every species that has fought the silence has lost." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was fierce. "But none of those species were human. We crawled out of the mud on a small blue planet and taught ourselves to reach the stars. We survived ice ages and plagues and wars that should have destroyed us. We split the atom and then chose not to use it to end ourselves. We are the species that looks at impossible odds and says, 'Let's try anyway.'" Across the fleet, men and women listened to their admiral's words. They were afraid. They would have been fools not to be afraid. But beneath the fear, there was something else. Something that had carried humanity through every challenge it ever faced. Stubbornness, determination, the absolute refusal to accept defeat. "Today, we show the galaxy what humanity is made of," Chen continued. "Today, we show the silence that it picked the wrong species to threaten. Today, we fight. And if we die on our feet, moving forward, with weapons in our hands and fire in our hearts." He straightened his shoulders and gave the final order. "All ships, engage the enemy." The human fleet surged forward like a spear thrown at the heart of darkness. Thousands of weapons powered up simultaneously. Engines roared as ships accelerated to attack speed. Fighter craft launched from carrier bays in waves, their pilots ready to give everything for their species. The Battle of the Viridian threshold had begun. The remaining Council forces watched from a safe distance. following Admiral Chun's orders to stay back and protect the civilian evacuation routes. They had expected humanity to form defensive lines, to fight a careful retreat, to buy time for escape. Instead, they watched the smallest and youngest species in the known galaxy charge directly into the jaws of extinction. The Volcari commander turned to Lieutenant Park, his compound eyes reflecting the distant flashes of weapon fire. "Your Admiral, your people, why are they doing this? The odds are impossible. They cannot win." Lieutenant Park watched the battle unfold on her display. Human ships were already taking fire, already suffering losses. But they kept moving forward, kept fighting, kept pushing into the darkness. "You don't understand us," she said quietly. "You never have. We don't fight because we know we can win. We fight because giving up is not something we know how to do." The first human ships reached the edge of the silence and disappeared into the darkness. Their weapons were still firing. Their engines were still burning. And somewhere in that darkness, something ancient felt an unfamiliar emotion. For the first time in 1,000,000,000 years, the silence wondered if it had made a mistake. The battle lasted 19 days. 19 days of fire and darkness. 19 days of death and desperate courage. 19 days that would be remembered long after the stars themselves burned out. The silence was not simply an enemy. It was an ecosystem of extinction. Billions of years old, it had consumed countless galaxies before finding its way to this one. It was made of creatures that existed partially outside normal space, things that could pass through solid matter and reform after being destroyed. It was a hunger that had never known defeat, and it had never faced anything like humanity. On the first day, human ships pushed deep into the darkness and discovered what they were truly fighting. The silence was not one creature but many, a vast collection of entities that worked together like cells in a body. Some were small, no larger than fighter craft. Others were continent-sized, ancient beings that had been feeding on civilizations since before Earth's sun was born. The council species had fought the silence with precision and discipline. They had formed lines, followed protocols, and died in perfect formation. Humans fought differently. Captain Maria Santos commanded the destroyer Relentless. When her ship's weapons were depleted, she ordered her crew to abandon ship and then piloted the vessel directly into the mouth of one of the massive creatures. The explosion killed the entity and damaged 3 others nearby. Her last transmission was 2 words: "Worth it." Pilot James Chun flew his fighter into a gap in one creature's armor and detonated his reactor core inside it. Lieutenant Yuki Tanaka sacrificed her cruiser to shield a refugee transport that had been caught in the battle zone. Commander Michael Okafor held a choke point for 6 hours with a crippled battleship, allowing the rest of his squadron to complete their mission. Every sacrifice provided data. Every death taught the fleet something new about the enemy. Human ships transmitted tactical information until the final second, turning their destruction into intelligence that helped others survive. The silence noticed. It was not used to prey that fought back this hard. It was not used to creatures that seemed willing to die as long as they hurt the enemy in the process. On the 5th day, it began to adapt. It changed its tactics, shifted its patterns, tried to overwhelm the human fleet with sheer numbers. For every creature the humans killed, 3 more emerged from the deeper darkness. Admiral Chun watched the casualty reports climb higher and higher. He had lost 2,000 ships, then 3,000. The fleet was being destroyed piece by piece, and there seemed to be no end to the silence's forces, but the refugees were escaping. Every hour the fleet held, millions more civilians reached safety behind the defensive lines. Every ship that died bought time for someone else to live. On the 10th day, something unexpected happened. The silence pulled back. Not far. Not for long. But for the first time in the battle, the wall of darkness stopped advancing. The creatures that had been pressing the attack suddenly hesitated, as if waiting for something. Admiral Chun stood on the bridge of the Defiance and studied his sensors. What are they doing? His science officer, Dr. Sarah Kim, had been analyzing the enemy since the battle began. She was exhausted, running on stimulants and determination, but her eyes were sharp. They're thinking, she said. They're actually thinking about us. Explain. The silence is a collective intelligence. All those creatures share one mind, and that mind has been watching us fight. It's been studying our tactics, our psychology, our willingness to sacrifice ourselves. Dr. Kim pulled up a series of charts on her display. I believe it's trying to understand something it has never encountered before. Admiral Chung considered this. They're wondering why we don't run. Yes, every other species they faced eventually broke and fled. We haven't. We keep attacking. We keep dying. And every time they think they've figured out our pattern, we do something unexpected. Dr. Kim shook her head. They don't know what to make of us. Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then, he made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. Prepare the Orpheus device. Dr. Kim's face went pale. Admiral, the Orpheus device is untested. We don't know what will happen if we use it. We know what will happen if we don't use it. We'll run out of ships, and the silence will consume everything. Chun turned to face her. The device was designed for exactly this situation. It's time to find out if it works. The Orpheus device was humanity's most closely guarded secret. It had been developed by a team of scientists who understood that conventional weapons might not be enough to stop an enemy like the silence. Instead of trying to destroy the collective intelligence, the device was designed to communicate with it directly, not through words, through something deeper, through shared experience, through memory. The device was brought to the bridge and activated. It looked simple, almost primitive. A metal sphere covered with sensors and transmitters. But inside it was technology that pushed the boundaries of human science. Admiral Chun placed his hands on the activation controls. Open a channel to the silence. All frequencies. I want them to hear this. The device hummed to life. Energy flowed through it, reaching out across space toward the wall of darkness. And then something happened that no one expected. The silence answered not with words, with images, with feelings. The collective mind of the enemy touched the device and tried to understand what it was feeling. Chun spoke, and the device translated his words into something the silence could comprehend. You think you know what we are. You think we're just another species to consume, another meal in your endless hunger. You're wrong. Images flowed through the connection. The silence saw human history. It saw apes learning to use tools, tribes surviving frozen winters with nothing but fire and determination, civilizations rising from mud and stone through sheer will. We have been prey before. Predators hunted us on our homeworld. Ice ages nearly destroyed us. Plagues swept through our populations. We waged wars against ourselves that should have ended our species forever. The silence watched humans split the atom. It watched them hold that terrible power in their hands and make the choice not to destroy themselves. It watched soldiers throw themselves on explosives to save their friends. It watched parents lift impossible weights to protect their children. It watched a species that faced death every day and refused to surrender to it. You are old. You are powerful. You have consumed galaxies, but you have never met anything like us. We are humanity. We are the species that looks at extinction and says, not today. We are the species that fights harder when we're losing than when we're winning. Admiral Chun's voice grew fierce. We are not your prey. We are not your food. If you continue this attack, we will fight you until the last human ship is destroyed. And then we will fight you with escape pods and spacesuits and our bare hands if we have to. We will never stop. We will never surrender. We will make you pay for every inch of space you try to take from us." The connection held. The silence processed everything it had seen and felt. Its billion-year-old mind tried to calculate the cost of continuing its assault against a species that simply refused to die. "This is your only warning," Chun said. "Leave this galaxy. Find easier prey somewhere else. Or stay and learn what it truly means to be hunted." The device fell silent. The connection broke. Admiral Chun stepped back, breathing heavily. His hands were shaking. He had just gambled the survival of his species on a conversation with a cosmic horror. For a long moment, nothing happened. The silence remained in place, vast and terrible and ancient. Then, slowly, it began to move. Not forward, backward. The wall of darkness that had consumed so much of the galaxy started to withdraw. The creatures within it turned away from human space and began drifting toward the edges of the galaxy. They were not fleeing in fear. They moved with the calm deliberation of a predator that had decided this particular prey was not worth the cost. Dr. Kim stared at her sensors in disbelief. "They're leaving. They're actually leaving." Admiral Chun collapsed into his command chair. He was exhausted, drained, barely able to keep his eyes open. But for the first time in 19 days, he allowed himself to feel something like hope. "It worked," he whispered. "God help us, it actually worked." The silence retreated into the darkness between galaxies. It would find other prey, other civilizations that lacked humanity's stubborn refusal to die. But it would remember this place. It would remember these strange creatures who fought without logic and died, without fear, and it would never return to this galaxy again. The galaxy was broken. 60% of the known population was gone. Entire species had been erased from existence, their worlds consumed, their histories forgotten. The great civilizations that had ruled the stars for millennia were now scattered remnants. Survivors clinging to whatever pieces of their old lives they could save. The council chamber still stood, though it was damaged now. Part of the crystal ceiling had shattered during a close encounter with the enemy, and cold starlight streamed through the gaps. The elevated platforms where 12 species had once sat in judgment were mostly empty. Only 5 remained. Ambassador Elena Vance walked across the polished floor for the second time in her life. 18 months ago, she had come here to deliver a warning. Now she came to witness the aftermath of that warning being ignored. High Arbiter Thiessen waited for her at the central platform. He looked different than she remembered. Smaller, somehow. His forearms hung loose at his sides, and his compound eyes had lost their arrogant shine. He was old, Elena realized. Old and tired and broken by loss. The Valkyrie had suffered more than most. 90% of their population was dead. Their homeworld, the center of their civilization for 50,000 years, was a burned husk orbiting a dying star. Everything they had built, everything they had believed about their place in the universe, was gone. Elena stopped a few meters from the platform and waited. "Ambassador," Thiessen said. His voice was rough, damaged. "Thank you for coming, High Arbiter." Thiessen was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. When he spoke again, each word seemed to cost him something. "I have been thinking about our last conversation. I have been thinking about it constantly, in fact. Every time I close my eyes, I see your face. I hear your warning. I remember how easily I dismissed you." Elena said nothing. She had spent 18 months preparing for this moment, but now that it was here, she found that her anger had faded. Looking at Thiessen, she did not see an arrogant ruler who had condemned billions to death. She saw a broken old man trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong. "You were right," Thiessen continued. "About everything. The silence. The danger. Our inability to face it. If we had listened to you, if we had prepared as you suggested, perhaps... He trailed off, unable to complete the thought. Perhaps fewer people would have died, Elena finished for him. Perhaps we could have stopped them sooner. Perhaps my species would not have lost 7,000 ships and 3 million lives fighting a war that should not have been necessary. Thiessen lowered his head. It was a gesture of submission, something no Valkyrie leader had shown to another species in recorded history. I am sorry, he said. Those words are not enough. They will never be enough. But they are all I have. Elena studied him for a long moment. She thought about the friends she had lost, the soldiers who had died, the families that would never be whole again. She thought about the cost of arrogance and the price of being ignored. Then she thought about something else. She thought about the refugee ships she had seen on her way to the chamber, packed with survivors from a dozen different species. She thought about the aid stations humanity had established throughout the damaged sectors, providing food and medicine to anyone who needed help. She thought about the reconstruction crews already working to rebuild what had been destroyed. Why did you do it? Thiessen asked suddenly. Why did humanity risk everything to save us? We mocked you. We dismissed you. We treated you like children playing at civilization. You had every reason to let us die. It was the question Elena had been expecting. She had prepared several answers, each one carefully crafted to make a political point or establish humanity's new position in galactic affairs. But looking at Thiessen now, she found that she did not want to give him a political answer. He deserved the truth, or at least as much of it as she understood herself. Because you were our neighbors, she said simply. And that is what neighbors do. Thiessen made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a sob. That is not a logical answer. No, Elena agreed. It is not. Humanity has never been particularly logical. We are emotional. We are contradictory. We make decisions based on instinct and feeling rather than calculation. We save people who do not deserve saving and fight wars that we have no reason to win. She stepped closer to the platform, looking up at the broken old leader. But that is also why we're still here. Logic would tell any species to accept defeat when the odds are impossible. Logic would tell them to conserve resources rather than spend them on hopeless causes. Logic is cold and careful and safe. Elena shook her head. We have never been safe. We have always been the species that does the illogical thing, the impossible thing, the thing that makes no sense until suddenly it does. Thiessen was quiet for a long time, processing her words. Finally, he spoke again. What happens now? The council is broken. The old powers are gone. The galaxy is in chaos. Now we rebuild, Elena said. Together. Not as rulers and subjects, not as elders and children. As partners. As equals and humanity? What will your species do? Elena turned to look out through the damaged ceiling at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, in the darkness between galaxies, the silence was still moving. It had retreated from this place, but it had not been destroyed. Someday, perhaps in 1,000 years, perhaps in 1,000,000, it might return. We will do what we have always done, she said. We will watch the dark. We will prepare for the worst. We will build ships and weapons and defensive systems that we hope we will never need. And if the monsters come again, we will be ready. You expect them to return? We expect everything. That is how we have survived this long. Elena turned back to face him. The silence is ancient. It has consumed galaxies. It learned something from fighting us, something that made it decide we were not worth the cost. But it is patient. It has time. Someday, it may decide to try again. She walked toward the chamber's exit, her footsteps echoing in the vast space. Ambassador, Thiessen called after her. Wait, Elena paused but did not turn around. "I need to know," Thiessen said. "Your admiral. Your soldiers. The humans who flew into certain death and fought anyway. What were they thinking? What made them willing to sacrifice everything?" Elena was quiet for a moment, considering the question. Then she turned, and there was something in her eyes that Thiessen had never seen before. It was not anger or pride or triumph. It was something older than that. Something that had been passed down through countless generations of humans since the first of them had looked up at the stars. They were thinking about the people they loved, she said. They were thinking about the children who would grow up in a galaxy free from fear. They were thinking about the future. Not their own future. The future of everyone who would come after them. She smiled, and it was a tired smile, a sad smile, but also a hopeful one. That is what humanity does, High Arbiter. We suffer today so that tomorrow can be better. We die so that others can live. We face the darkness so that the light can survive. She shrugged. It is not logical. It is not efficient. But it is who we are. She walked out of the chamber, leaving Thiessen alone with his thoughts and his grief, and his slowly growing understanding of the species that has saved his people. Outside, the stars burned in the endless night. Ships moved between them, carrying survivors and supplies and hope. The galaxy was broken, but it was not dead. Already, new things were beginning to grow in the spaces where old things had been destroyed. Elena stood at a viewport and watched the lights of passing vessels. She thought about Admiral Chun, recovering in a medical facility after weeks of exhaustion. She thought about Lieutenant Park and Captain Santos and all the others who had given everything. She thought about the monument that would someday be built to honor them. A young officer approached her nervously. "Ambassador? Your shuttle is ready." Elena nodded but did not move immediately. She was looking at the stars, at the vast darkness that lay beyond them, at all the unknown threats that might be waiting out there. "Ambassador?" the officer repeated. Elena turned away from the viewport. "Tell the shipyards to begin the next construction phase. Tell the listening posts to double their sensor range. Tell Admiral Chun that his job is not finished. Ma'am?" She started walking toward the shuttle bay, her stride steady and determined. The silence was only the beginning. The galaxy is full of things we have not yet encountered. We need to be ready for all of them. The officer hurried to keep up with her. "Do you really think there are more threats out there?" Elena glanced at him with something that might have been amusement. "There are always more threats. There is always another darkness waiting beyond the light." She stepped onto the shuttle and turned to face the stars one last time. "But that is fine, because there will always be humanity, standing watch in the night." She sat down as the shuttle's engines powered up. "And we will always be waiting." The shuttle rose from the station and turned toward Earth, toward home, toward the small blue planet where a stubborn species had first learned to fight back against the dark. Behind her, the galaxy began its long recovery. And somewhere in the void between the stars, the ancient things that waited there looked toward this small corner of space and remembered the lesson they had learned. Some prey was not worth hunting. Some species were too stubborn to die. Some lights refused to be extinguished. And humanity would make sure it stayed that way. They called us young. They called us reckless. They called us afraid of the dark. They were wrong about the last part. We have never been afraid of the dark. We are what the dark learned to fear. Inscription on the memorial to the fallen, Luna 2847.